Evening, assalamu alaikum, and a very warm welcome to everyone. So my name is Sana Majid, and I am learning strategist at Adam Camp Arabia. For those joining us for the first time, Adam Camp Arabia is building the future of learning by providing AI solutions and AI trainings across Pakistan, UK, KSA, and beyond. This is yet another webinar in our AI learning series, and we have already had some powerful sessions with Dr. Sabah Kudwai, Matthew Winters, Azina Shilish, where we explored how AI is transforming teaching, learning, and decision making. And I'm very excited to introduce our speaker for today, Thompson Thomas, the CEO and co-founder of EduAid. Thompson is leading one of the most innovative AI platforms specifically designed for teachers. His work is at intersection of pedagogy and AI tool design, making AI actually useful and practical for educators inside their real classroom. So EduAid is rapidly being, recognized for enabling educators to not just save time, but actually improve the instructional design, quality, and learning outcomes. And today's topic is extremely relevant for most of the educators, trainers, teachers, because we are talking about teaching with AI. So there are so many tools out there, yet most of the time people find them not very effective. And the reason is usually not the tool, it's the quality of instruction we give to AI. So this webinar will help you to understand how to make AI tools work for you. Before we begin, all the participants, you are welcome to drop your questions in the chat at any time. Reactions are open throughout the sessions. We will have a dedicated Q&A session at, in the last 15 minutes. And this session is open access, so feel free to share this link with your colleagues, fellows, to invite them and join us live. And Thompson, we are very happy to have you with us today, and over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. Today, I would like to show you a little bit about how you would teach with an artificial intelligence, a large language model. Am I coming through okay? Can I get a thumbs up if the sound is fine? Yes, great, wonderful. So, what we will do today is first, I'm going to share my screen. There we are. So instead of just working through a static presentation where I tell you a bunch of facts, you try to remember some of those facts and then maybe use them later, I would like to kind of make this more collaborative. We're going to solve some problems here together tonight. As such, you'll be able to see how the concepts we're discussing will be applied to teaching, will be applied to learning, will be applied to working with a large language model. And along the way, I will highlight a big idea. I'll say this is an important thing. If you're going to take anything away from this session, it should be this concept, okay? So we're going to solve some problems. We're going to build something together. I'm not going to demo a product. I'm going to show you how to do it for yourself. And then I will highlight big ideas along the way to take away from this. So right here we have an agenda, and this is the whiteboard that we'll be working on all evening. I'll draw some diagrams and explain different topics along the way. So we have prompting a large language model for educational use cases. So before anything, we want to begin with some definitions. We'll talk a little bit about all of the pieces that we mean and what they mean. Then we'll look at some learning objectives and where to start in working with a large language model. Then we'll think about methods of instruction, identifying the technology, integrating research, and then finally prompting, testing, and refining. It's only after you get through all of these steps that you can design quality materials. So if you look at most prompts for an educational use case for a large language model, they tend to look something like this. They tend to take this general form. They begin with a description of the role. You'll see some prompts say, you are an expert teacher, or you are a curriculum designer. And then you'll see the prompt move into some description of context. You are creating a worksheet, or you are creating a lesson plan. And then some specification of what the lesson plan should include, a task for the AI to complete, and then occasionally you will see an example. This is how most folks will prompt for an AI in education. I'm here to tell you tonight that this is not that efficient. You could do a better job at prompting an AI than this. This is something that people landed upon back on AI, GPT 3.5 when ChatGPT first launched, and it doesn't take into account, I believe, what these models can really do. So let's begin with the definitions and we'll get closer to it. So a large language model is the underlying technology for most of the platforms you will work on that use AI. So ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok, Eduade, Magic School, School AI, teacher-facing AIs, foundation model AIs, they're all large language models. And to give a simplified description of what a large language model is for everyone, it's not thinking, it doesn't reason in the same way that we do. It doesn't have experiences in the same way that we do. Rather, a large language model is a statistical model of human language. If I was to ask you to think of a place, just take a city, any city, and I was to ask you to think about that city, well, you would have experiences with the place. Maybe it's the buildings, maybe it's the food, a particular place you like to eat, maybe it's a particular smell or a feeling, a temperature that comes to mind, right? You have experiences with the place. A large language model does not have experiences of the place like you do. Rather, a large language model may be more like a GPS, where if I was to type the name of that city into a GPS, it would provide latitude and longitude coordinates on a grid. It can tell the difference between places because you could see where they place on the coordinate plane, but it doesn't have experiences of the place. Similarly, large language models do that with human language. They map it on a large coordinate system, not latitude and longitude per se. There's billions of these parameters, but it has a very sophisticated map of language. And from there, it takes your input. It'll break your input down into, say, tokens. It'll match those tokens and kind of weigh them and see which responses, which words or parts of words typically follow the input that you provided. And it does a great job of this statistical modeling. So good, in fact, that we mistake it for thinking, right? We say, okay, this looks like something a person would write in some cases. But there's always a piece that's not quite there, maybe a little missing from the large language model's output. Today, we'll get into how to solve for that problem. So for any lesson, the first place you want to start is at the level of a lesson objective. What is it that you want to solve? I think the best lesson I ever learned about educational technology is when you are considering it, the first step is to strip away all technology. Don't think about any technology and ask, what is it that I want to accomplish in my classroom today? What is it that I want my students to learn or to be able to do? What task do I want them to perform? You start at that level every time. If you don't know where you're going, you will not know the best means to get there. So once you identify what the objective is, which also should be very specific, you should not say, I want my students to learn about some topic, right? You want a very specific example, a task that they should be able to elicit, a level of thinking that you wish to occur, a specific piece of information or a specific task or role. That's the first step for working with an LLM. That's the first step for designing a good lesson, for working with students in the most productive way. Goals first. We have our goal, so we'll start there. We're on section 2 here. We have a learning objective. Then, and only then, do you think about which method of instruction would best bring success in this objective about. It's an uncomfortable truth in education that there is no surefire way to get something to work in the classroom. It's a game of probabilities. You will create the conditions for learning to take place in your class. Does that mean learning will take place for every student every day, all the time? Of course not. It's a progressive thing. It's an iterative thing, something you have to build upon. You respond to what your student provides. You meet your student where they are. You provide supports and encouragement and additional materials to help that student grow and then achieve the objective. So it's not a perfect science. We work in terms of probabilities. So we want methods of instruction that have a higher likelihood, a better chance of raising the probability for learning to occur. So you identify your method, you identify your objective. We have those two pieces of information in our minds. Here's the example. Let's say I am working with students in a geography course. I'm going to use geography. That's what I taught. I want students to be able to explain the effect of, and pardon me, I'm going to use an example from the US as that's the context I work in, but you can, in your mind, I think you'll be able to translate this to a local context. I want the students to be able to understand the effect of the Rocky Mountains on rainfall in the western states. So a mountain range, maybe it creates a desert in the rain shadow, and there's maybe verdant green fields on the other side. So I want students to understand the effect of mountains on climate patterns. That's the class objective. Perhaps I want to provide, how would I go about doing this? I want students to be able to explain the effect of this mountain range on climate patterns on either side of the mountain. Well, one, I want to test student prior knowledge. I want to see what they know about climate, right? I want to see what they know about weather patterns. I want to see what they know about mountains, right? Do we understand these basic concepts? Okay, so you want a prior knowledge measure. How do you measure a student's prior knowledge? Now that's the second step. What method of instruction can I use to solve this problem that I have? Perhaps it's a short review at the beginning of class, a set of 3 discussion questions. I will tell the students, you will first write a response on a piece of paper, then you will turn to a student next to you, you will ask them what they had, you will discuss, and then we'll talk as a class. Okay, so I need 3 questions to elicit a student response talking about mountains, climate systems, and weather patterns. Now I identify the technology. Like, okay, well, I know I need a paper, of course, for the students to write. I need pencils for them to be able to write this down. But I'm going to use an AI to help me design the questions. So this is where we introduce the technology. We have the method, we have the objective, we know what we want the AI to do. We want the AI to design 3 discussion questions to elicit a student response where we can measure the prior knowledge they have for a lesson we are going to do. This is where we move into integration research. We need to understand which types of questions are best suited to elicit that response. What form should those questions take? How would we ask an AI to develop those questions? Because what we don't want to do is go on to ChatGPT and say, I need 3 questions about mountains, climate systems, and weather patterns. The questions you will get may not target the prior knowledge you were talking about in class. The questions you will get are not in any way responsive to the students you have before you. They're not going to understand your local context. And then the questions may not have the depth of knowledge that you are looking for. You want the students to engage in meaning making, to explain exactly what they know, not be open to interpretation, not be a subjective response, not be something that is not so clear that you can work off of it as a teacher. And again, at any time, please interrupt me in the comment section, ask any questions. I'm happy to respond throughout. We want to make this interactive instead of some men blathering on at you for an hour. So please feel free to join me with some questions. So we move into prompting, testing, refining. Here's what we have. Exactly. Prior knowledge of every student is different. That's why we're developing these questions, because we want to understand where our students are at to help us guide the lesson that we're going to teach. So we want to figure out exactly where each of those students are. We want to design questions to get to that level, to understand it. And that's a difficult task. It's not so straightforward to do so. So we ask in large language model to assist in the question development, and we will see. So let me share a prompt, one moment, let me pull it up, for discussion questions that might assist us in this project. One moment. Okay. Thank you for your patience. Here is the prompt. Let me share my screen again. Okay. Okay. So this is the ChatGPT playground. It's where you're able to work with a large language model, share prompts, and design them, test them, see what they look like. That's what we'll use today together. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how we at Eduate design our prompts, and I think this will give you some insight into how you might go about writing your own prompts for assisting in the classroom. So I have just an older prompt that we've used in the past. This is just specifications for formatting. We can ignore this. We're not going to worry about the markdown notation for right now. Instead, we're going to look at this section here with the whole prompt written. We'll go to Excalidraw on the whiteboard and we'll look at a prompt deeply, piece by piece. So the first thing you want to do is you want to start the level of task, right? What is the task that we want the AI to complete? Now, this is different than, say, starting with a role. Well, oftentimes you'll see AI prompts start with a role. You are an experienced fifth grade science teacher, or you're an experienced high school geography teacher. This, people believe, can help the model adapt to the appropriate tone and depth, but it doesn't ensure quality for a lot of the reasons I laid out earlier, which is an AI has no conception of what an effective fifth grade teacher would do. We're playing a language game with the model to try to elicit that response. So you start with the task. You want to begin by telling the AI exactly what you want it to produce in as simple language as possible. As you can see, the topic here is very simple. This is for a worksheet on short answer questions for a math class. Generate a short answer retrieval worksheet with progressive question sequences and a teacher implementation guide. Being specific about the format, short answer retrieval worksheet, about some of the constraints. It needs progressive questions, which means they build off of one another. And then any additional information, like I want a teacher implementation guide. How would I use this? You have your inputs. Now for Eduate, these inputs are variable, which is why you see this. But for you, it would be something like you would put your learning objective that we established here. And this is the first area where I want to introduce some audience choice. Would it be helpful to talk a little bit about what goes into an effective learning objective for an AI, or would you like to continue looking at the prompt? You could say option 1 in the chat if you want to look a little bit into lesson objectives for AIs, or we could move right on. So option number 2, if you want to just look at the prompt in some more detail. What are we thinking? What would be more effective for all of you? Give me a 1 or 2 in the chat and I'll know which direction to take. Again, option 1, dive into talking about lesson objectives for an AI. Or option 2, continue looking at the prompt pieces and we'll move on from learning objectives. Okay, perfect. So let's talk a little bit about learning objectives quickly. So a learning objective means that we start with the end in mind. You want to begin at the end of class. What is it that the student should be doing, right? Backward design. Start at the end, work backwards. What is it that the student should be able to accomplish? So learning objectives, or sometimes referred to as learning outcomes or learning goals, perhaps, but that's not quite correct. A learning objective is a statement that would describe in very clear terms what students are expected to achieve as a result of instruction. So it's, we as teachers have a hypothesis that our instruction would result in some sort of consequence for the student thinking. It's different than a goal, right? Objectives, clear criteria that we can use to measure our effectiveness. Students will be able to describe the effect of mountain ranges on weather patterns and provide examples of this concept. Or students will be able to factor like expressions. I will step beyond my ability if I begin giving math examples. Again, I was a social studies teacher, so please excuse my limited range of examples this evening. But essentially, The benefits of a learning objective is it gives you direction, and it also focuses student thinking, a good learning objective, that is. And it also, the third tier here, so one, it gives direction to the teachers. Two, it helps the students know what to expect and what performance will be elicited from them. And then third, the third full affordance is that it provides a large language model with the context in which you are working. Your lesson objective shares much about your content area, because there is some sort of content learning goal implied in the objective, and then the means of which you wish to elicit that objective. So the AI gets a lot of information from your lesson objective, and it has to be well designed. A learning objective must be student-centered. So it must be something that is written that you could put in front of your student, and they would be able to read it and understand it. It shouldn't be in jargon or language only a teacher can understand. It must be something that the student can understand and interact with. Small side note, this is important for the large language model, because if you put it in the grade level voice, the reading level of your students, the AI picks up on this as well. So when you specify, going back to that prompt, your grade level, what you're teaching, sharing the learning objective as well is like a double leaven of context for the AI. So it understands exactly the grade level, reading level, tone. You imply a lot of information in these two pieces. The rest is all context, structure. This is where you introduce your content, your objectives, your classroom kind of context, okay? So vitally important to get the objective and the grade level right. In short, a lesson objective is specific. It breaks a broad topic down into component parts, something that is manageable. You don't want cognitive overload. You don't want students to be able to say, explain the entire history of this civilization, right? That would be way too much information to do in a single lesson, right? You would want to break this down into very small components that you progressively build day over day, week over week, lesson over lesson. A good learning objective is also measurable. It shouldn't be something that you would never know if a student succeeded in achieving it. It should be something that you could look to, then look to some assessment that you provide to your student and say, okay, they did achieve this today, or they did not achieve this today. It should be very clear and measurable. Or they got close to achieving it today, and they failed at this place or this place, and then you know what to do tomorrow. You can say, okay, they could identify what a mountain is. They could identify what the climate zones are, but they could not explain the interplay between the two, which is what I wanted them to do. So now we need to look more at the system. I need to explain the process. Okay. It should be achievable. Again, given what you know about your students. If you want students to say, evaluate the persuasive techniques in a historical document. Well, if the student cannot read at the reading level appropriate for the document, then it's not achievable for them. You have to take a step back. You want to teach the vocabulary that will be used in the document such that the student will be able to then read the document and evaluate techniques used in the argument. Should be result oriented, of course, and it should be time bound, something that can be done by the end of class or the end of the week. That does not mean that once you finish the lesson, you stop. You want to revisit those materials throughout the year. This is called retrieval, spaced, or interleaved practice. You do these three things. You space your practice over time. You constantly force students to retrieve information from their minds, and then you bring in old topics and new topics, and you mix them together so that students form firm memory structures. So you want to identify the object. What is it the student will do, determine the level of mastery, and then complete the learning objective from there. So any questions about a learning objective? Again, you have a be specific, measurable, achievable. Oh wait, sorry, there we go. Achievable, results oriented, time bound, and these are your pieces. So when you're looking at your objective that you're setting to your large language model, again, is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Is it results oriented? Is it time bound? That is the learning objective. Now, some of you might be asking a question. I'm anticipating a question that's going to come up. Student's personality can affect learning objectives. Yes, that is true. So a student's personality, how much sleep they got the night before, any things that are going on at home. Maybe a relative from out of town is visiting and the students are very excited. They're distracted by this, or many other contextual factors. There's so many things that affect a student entering your classroom that day. And then everything you do as a teacher creates a reaction in that student's mind. And then that student interacts with another student that creates another reaction. It's if you've ever played the game of billiards where you are playing pool, you're shooting the different balls around. As a teacher, you shoot the cue ball, bounces 20 other minds around the classroom in different directions that you cannot anticipate. And your job is to react to these things and to provide guidance and support and mentoring and differentiated materials of instruction to assist students. So yes, again, every action you take will have not only an equal and opposite reaction in the students, but then many reactions from all of the students in your class. It is a difficult job, but it is so. That's why it's so rewarding to do. But coming back to the learning objective for the AI, we provide a goal in mind. Again, the objective is not a surefire thing. It's not something that will always work in the classroom. It's a belief that this will result in some form of learning in my students, creating the conditions for learning. Will all students learn at the same path and pace? No, they will not. But you want to create progress in each student the best that we can. So we have the objective. We'll specify whatever the grade is that you are teaching. So what level, what age are the students that you're working with? And now we begin to move into the requirements for the AI. And this is the question that I figured you would all have in mind. You must be thinking right now, I remember people selling AI to me as something that it will make me more productive, will make teaching more efficient, will allow me to plan more quickly. That's a nice marketing slogan. But the truth is that it's technology. And like any technology, it takes some time to learn. It has an immediate cost that you have to spend some time learning how to do this well. Because if you don't do it well, you're going to spend all of your time fixing everything that happened that you didn't do so well. And that's not going to save you time. It'll take more time, if anything. But if you follow the procedures, which may be slightly slower than how you work today, you can progressively get better with the technology, work more efficiently with the technology, and then use that to yield some real results in your classroom. Can an AI do everything? No. Can it do everything you would want it to do for a teacher? No. But it can do a few things well. It can assist you in what I think are the three most effective practices for a teacher. Retrieval practice. Students are pulling information actively from their memory. Spaced over time, so repeating that practice over time, and then interleaving in different questions through that time period. This is not particularly an exciting process, but it's one that the AI can best assist with, creating varied types of questions, far beyond the capability that we have in the limited time that we have to plan. So creating wide ranges of questions, wide ranges to present the information. But it's not so good at tutoring a student that will have to fall to you, the teacher. But now you will have many materials to assist in that job, to respond to the different student personalities, to the different student abilities. We have a question. Sometimes we're confused about learning objective because the number of objectives. So how do we identify the main learning objective on priority basis? Yes. So I would suggest the way that we work at Eduate is we try to get you to enter in 3 objectives maximum in hierarchical order. Which is my primary objective? What is the secondary objective? What's the tertiary objective? You could think of the secondary and tertiary, so you should label them, but you can think of the secondary and tertiary objectives as kind of success criteria. That is, you should be able to do the third objective, the second objective, and doing both of those gets the student closer to the primary one. But you want to specify how you weigh the objectives. The AI will not know that, so it falls onto you. So if you have multiple objectives, you should tell the AI exactly what is the hierarchy of these objectives, which is most important, which is secondary, tertiary, and so on and so forth. And I would say the best place to do that would be right here in the learning objective category. So this says inputs. You can also say learning objective, then you can say secondary objective. How are we doing on time here? Great, we're about halfway through. Perfect. And then we will say tertiary objective. And then maybe you have additional contextual information about the content that you're teaching. This might be you already have a reading that the students will do, and you want to share that reading to the AI so it knows what information the students will have access to. That's perfectly fine to share. Maybe you have what you did the day before in class, and you say, oh, I did this yesterday. Here are the objectives today. Let's design something that is not going to repeat and cover the same ground, might complement it, might be progressive from it. But you can share contextual information here. Inputs are all of the things that will change from class to class. The output requirements, these are the things that should not change. These are the structured pieces. This is the, what should the AI do for this particular thing? I believe this example that we have here is, again, for a short answer worksheet for students for a math class. We're providing text passages, questions that the students will then write a response to and show their work. Okay. So how many questions do we want? That's something that you would specify here. Again, I want 12 short answer questions with blank space beneath each for written responses. So you have to be able to envision what you want to create. You cannot assume that the AI will know anything about what you want to create. Okay. Section 1. Now we specify questions 1 through 6, the first half of questions. For this, I want to employ what is known as successive, minimally different successive questions. This is an effective practice in math where you provide a very similar problem over and over again, and you change only one part of it to focus student attention on that one part. So I tell the AI, use one consistent question frame appropriate to the subject area. Each successive question should alter only one small aspect, the numbers and math, vocabulary and language, historical context and social studies, a text excerpt for your language class, an experimental condition for science, a technical step in a engineering or a technology course, or an artistic medium for arts. And then you progressively increase the difficulty of those questions while maintaining the continuity. So it should be the similar question through all 6, and it just scales up the difficulty. So I tell the AI that's exactly what I want it to do. Then we want to introduce a new but related question, then continue the progressive variation in complexity. Yes, exactly. So really any particular, again, the question is, in our school, we are focusing on 4C, 21st century skills. Is it possible to add these features in our worksheets or lesson planning with AI? You can add any contextual information that you have about what you're teaching, about your curriculum for the AI. So if there's a 21st century skill in particular that you must use, an objective or something in the curriculum, you specify that to the AI. Or if you want that the worksheet would elicit responses that engage students in a level of thinking that's implied in your curriculum, you can specify that as well. All I'm showing you right now is the frame, how you might adapt this. We don't have to think about the specifics that I'm writing here. That will change from person to person, classroom to classroom. But once you land on specifics for the structure of a worksheet, you tend to want to keep that and then tweak little parts. You want to be able to control tightly for the information you're providing for the AI, because any change that you make in your prompt will have an effect on how the AI will then sample its text to give you a response. So if you want to control for the control for the structure of the worksheet, you keep that the same. Change up at the input level here, where you're talking about curriculum or context. That's where it would be appropriate to introduce that information. So, task, variables. So you move from the task, which is a very simple statement, one sentence, what is the AI doing? You move into variables about your class. What's your grade? What are your objectives? What are your curriculum goals? What's the context? And then output requirements. This is where you tell the AI how to structure the material. This is where the research comes in. You should identify what the best or optimal structure of that material is for a general population. You provide the AI some examples. Then you have some design principles. Questions should progress in difficulty within and across the sections. Keep language grade appropriate and aligned to the subject area. Avoid extraneous changes that create novelty but no conceptual depth. Encourage retrieval practice and conceptual transfer. So quick recall for accuracy or explaining, applying, teaching others. And then an implementation guide for teachers. So append any implementation guides at the bottom. So I tell it where to place this information that I wanted to add. And then finally, formatting. Number the questions, provide space for student responses. It's not a design where you draw it or you have a word editor. You have to picture the assignment in your head clearly, which is, again, why it's so important to start with your objective. If you can envision what you want the students to do, that's half of working with an AI. So let's take this prompt. Let's copy it into the playground, and let's see how it works. So inputs, I will say my objective is a short answer worksheet. Perfect. I'm going to go to Eduate for a moment. I'm going to take a math objective to show you how this might work for a math class. Use rational approximations of irrational numbers to compare the size of irrational numbers, plot them approximately on a number line, and estimate the value of expressions involving irrational numbers. Great. Let's use this math example. So I'll copy that. I'll say this is my objective for class. I'll say I am working with 8th grade students. I have the rest of the worksheet explained here. Let's submit it. I have a short answer response. I have the teacher guide. There's the space for the students to write their responses. Okay, let's look at the quality now. This is the important test. Wait, it's math, right? It's doing this because the AI is not being able to write proper math notation in the AI model itself. So let's do the same thing. And now I'm going to show you why Eduate AI might help you a little bit in something like this. All of that research that we did, we took 38 minutes together, and we talked about the research. We talked about writing the structure. I already had something prepared. If we had to write this for ourselves, this might take quite a bit of time. Again, Eduate AI does all of that research ahead of time. We do that alignment piece such that you can just simply go to, it was a worked example. Great. Okay, well, now we see the math notation rendered properly here. So Eduate helps with some of that, the pieces for the formatting and whatnot to make this a bit easier. And I just realized that I clicked on the wrong prompt, so allow me to generate that short answer worksheet. Perfect. Okay. So here's the prompt that we created today. Again, it has the sections, the output criteria, the design principles. It provides examples. It has all of the structural information, formatting, task, all of this. It created the worksheet, but we said that was a lot of work. What if we say do this on Eduate, where my team has already taken the liberty of doing all of the research components and designing the prompts in the way that I described? maybe saving you even more time. Now you have something like this: proper math notation. The questions are in that exact format that we discussed. Minimally different problem frames. They are the same. You have the space for the students to write. You have the implementation guide. As a teacher, how will I go about teaching this? Warm up with quick checks such as mini whiteboards where you have students write down the expressions, where you have the independent activity, class-wide discussions, peer comparisons, reinforcement checks, everything that you would need, right? And then you could say download it right into a Google Doc or send it to your Microsoft Word, and there you are. So on EduAid, you simplify the whole prompting process by just sharing your objective. That's all we ask you to share here. We say, just share the objective, that one step. Whereas again, if you're working on this solely by yourself, identifying your learning objectives and context is the first step in a long process. Now, I encourage you, if you want to spend the time doing this yourself, you totally should. It's a great skill to have, being able to effectively work with an AI across any system. That way, if your school adopts a ChatGPT membership or you use a local AI model hosted on your own computer, whatever it is, you would be able to make it yourself. But if you want to use a system that's out there designed to assist in making this process a little simpler, something like EduAid AI, which my team and I have worked on, might be a useful place for you to begin, to start getting comfortable with using an AI while ensuring that what you're creating is quality. Or you could try it for yourself. Go make something and then come to EduAid and compare what you made to what came on EduAid. Okay, so we are about at 11:42. Let's look at another example. I'll show a little bit about EduAid. I would like to give you all a preview of the new version of EduAid as well that has not been released yet, to show you a few new tools that I think are pretty interesting. But I will pause for just a moment and see if anyone has additional questions that I could address at this stopping point. Okay. So let us then structure this. Take a moment to change this. So this is the example prompt structure we looked at before. People would describe their role, describe the context, describe the task, describe the example. This new system, and if you would take a screenshot or whatever it is here, now would be the time to do it. So you can take a look at what this context would be. So you want to, 1, state the task clearly. 2, list detailed restraints and criteria. What is it that you want the AI to do? What do you not want the AI to do? What should it always include? What should it never include in the response? These kinds of things. From there, we move to step 3. Which is you want to encode the method's principles into the prompt. What I mean by that is, if you are creating an example for students, you are creating an analogy to explain something, you are creating a script for direct instruction while you are talking to the students in some sort of lecture format or a question and answer, if you are developing a lab for a science class, if you are developing a passage for students to read to one another, an oral reading passage, if you are designing, let's just look at EduAid here, an essay exemplar, keyword assignments. If you are developing a research project, you are developing a Socratic seminar, a discussion, a model that you're going to share with the class, whatever it is, a debate, who knows, whatever the thing that you're doing in class, you want to encode the principles of that task into the prompt. Explain, what does a good model look like? What does a good seminar look like? What does a good lecture look like? What does a good worked example look like? The best way to do this simply I'm being honest with all of you, is to go to Google Scholar. You would say work examples in maths education. Take a look at some of the research papers. I mean, that's really the best way to connect research to practice in education, is to take a look at the research. Now, again, if you don't have the time to do this, something like EduAid, we take these papers, we encode them, and then we will implement them into the prompts. And I'll show you just a moment how we do that. But when I talk about teaching methods, that's what I mean. It's the thing that you use in class to support student learning. It could be a small thing, an example that you provide to your students. That's a method. A retrieval practice worksheet, that's a method. A lecture, that's a method. These are all things that you use in class. Okay. Then to 4, which is to specify the output format, spacing, where do you want things laid out on a page, how many types of things, and whatnot. 5th, include examples. And I'll say this part is optional. If you have an example, great to include for the AI. If you don't have an example, not going to break your prompt or whatever it is. It just does a better job of giving the AI a sense of direction of where to go. And then underneath that, I would say like 5.1, you would talk about tone or length or complexity, just different pieces there. And that's basically the structure that you might want to take for working with an LLM. It's not the role and task and description. It's state the task clearly, list all the detailed constraints, what you want it to do, what you don't want it to do, encode the methods, principles into the prompt. I'll show you an example of how EduAid does that in just a moment. We'll specify the output format, we'll include examples, and then we'll talk about the tone of the AI's response, the length and the complexity and things like this. Okay. Let me now go to my notes here. Perfect, here we are. So this is how EduAid would go about taking these papers and doing the research. So this is the EduAid knowledge graph. There are about 128 entries. Each of these entries is a different instructional research paper that we ingest. I'll show you how how our ingestion process looks like. You take the abstract of the paper. We will look at what are the instructional implications of the paper. So what is it that what does this mean for teaching? Right. So only a subset of commonly used learning techniques are strongly supported with robust evidence. That's what this paper tells us. It tells us that practice testing, students quizzing themselves, in distributed practice, that is practice over time, show the highest utility in the classroom across ages, across contexts, and across tasks. Then you have techniques like elaborative interrogation, that's asking follow-up questions of the students, self-explanation, that is asking questions that make the students explain the steps they took themselves, and then interleaving practice, that is, again, mixing and matching the types of questions you ask. They show promise, but need more validation. And then things like highlighting, rereading, summarization, using mnemonics, and using imagery have limited or inconsistent benefits. Then we'll tag this paper to the different tools on EduAid so we know where to apply this paper. And then we develop a rubric, and we use this rubric to grade our AI's responses. And then from there, we essentially fine-tune our AI to respond in a way that is more consistent, that we tag as being a good and solid response. So this is how EduAid uses research to inform our prompting. Now, again, as a teacher, do you have time to conduct this amount of research to identify different papers that would apply to the method you want to use in class? Perhaps not. And again, that's why something like EduAid might be an effective tool for you to use outside of, say, just ChatGPT. I would suggest, of course, learning how to do this yourself, and then you can constantly improve your own practice, and then use a tool like EduAid when time is of the essence, or when you want to compare what we have done to your own work. So again, if you're going to take a screenshot of anything in the not lesson of the webinar tonight, it would certainly be this outline. An examination paper. So for that, I'm presuming that you would want a question, probably a rubric to help you grade the students' papers. Okay. So let me show you on Eduate how you would go about that. In fact, I hope you won't mind. I would like to use the newer version of Eduate that we're currently testing. So not a finished product, but I'll show you a little bit about this today. It's excited. It's coming at the end of the month. But if you were to say want to create an examination paper, well, perhaps you would just say, I want to create an examination paper. And you can get suggestions for the materials to use. We'll recommend you a few different tools. So we have a test, we have an exam, and we have a quiz tool. You could say, select the exam, specify what it is that you are examining the students on. So what are the goals that the students should be able to achieve? What are the things the students should be able to do on your examination? Perhaps allow me to select a few examples from science courses. Again, I'm using a US example, but you can, again, use any context that you are working in. I will work from, let's take a physics examination. And let's say these are the 3 objectives. Yeah, students should be able to ask questions, define problems based on observations on information from text, phenomena, models, or investigations. They should be able to apply scientific practices to plan and conduct descriptive, comparative, experimental investigations, and use appropriate safety equipment and practices during laboratory. Maybe that's not a great one to examine on. Here we are. Define scalar and vector quantities, analyze different types of motion, and describe and analyze motion in one dimension. Perfect. We have 3 objectives. I input those there. We're working with, say, high school students. You can select your model. I'll select the faster model as opposed to the reasoning model today, and we will generate. Eduate's doing all of the rubric and the grading and all of the research piece in the background. Okay. And now I have the exam. Now, you were talking about an examination paper in particular. This is a full examination. Let me show you where you would do that. But this is how you might go about designing an exam on Eduate. Eduate will create multiple sections of questions, 20 multiple choice questions, true and false questions, fill in the blank questions, matching questions, short answer, essays, and whatnot. Perhaps you want a rubric for this. Please create an answer key and rubric. And then it will create an updated answer key for this that you now have handy. We'll tell you exactly what the student should do, especially for the short answers, right? It will create the exemplar responses. You could say, insert into document. I have now my answer key at the bottom of my test. Perhaps you want to now also create an essay. You have essay tools here. Maybe you want to develop a games lesson builder. We'll go to, say, questions, different types of questions that you could then insert into there for your examination or whatever it might be. Okay, so we now have about 6 minutes left together. I'll take a moment just to summarize and then answer again any outstanding questions that we have today. So prompting a large language model for educational use cases. Always start at the level of your lesson objective first. What is the thing that you want to accomplish in your class today? Then, which method of instruction? How would you go about teaching that day to succeed in achieving that objective? Maybe the students will be working together in a project. Maybe you will have the students work with a partner in a short answer worksheet. Maybe you will do direct instruction. Lots of options. So you select your method. Identify the technology we'll use. Some days you may not need to use generative AI. You say, okay, I understand how to do this well enough. I can do it in class. Some days it might be, I need to create various types of questions. I need to create various types of materials that I do not have. Maybe using a generative AI tool would be a useful intervention at that moment. You need to integrate some level of research into your prompt, which is, what should my example or lecture or seminar look like? How will it relate to my objective? How will I know the students are succeeding? All of that. And then you begin prompting. Then you test your prompts, refine, make sure everything was working well for you. What does your prompt look like? It has a very clear task. It has a very extensive list of constraints and criteria. You encode the principles of instruction that you want to use in the prompt, specify the outputs, include examples, talk about tone. Here's just one example for a worksheet in class. Quite a long prompt for what you are creating. You could do all of this, and then in short, you could also say, use something like Eduate that does all of these steps for you. But again, it's important to know how to do it yourself and understand what works under the hood. Thank you all so much for your time and attention this evening. Again, if you have any questions, I'll stick around for a few more minutes. Happy to answer any of those that come up. Again, thank you so much.
Yes, if there are any questions, please type it in the chat box. In the meanwhile, I had this question, Thomas, that where do you feel teachers might compromise learning quality if they rely too much on AI?
Yes, so in working with an AI, it can become what they call sycophantic, which means it will essentially praise what the person who is using the AI will say, that's a great idea, or you should continue doing this. And if a teacher doesn't have a firm understanding of the methods of instruction, and they are just asking an AI, is this a good idea to use in class? The AI may just say that it is, even though it is not so great to be used. So you must be discerning when working with an AI. That is, if you try to work beyond your objectives and you don't have methods in mind, and you just ask an AI for ideas, those ideas may sometimes be effective, but more often than not, they will not relate to your classroom, your students, the population that you're working with, the personalities of the students that you're working with. You as the teacher knows this. So if you are able to kind of convey this to the AI without revealing personal information about your students, then you're better suited. But if you go beyond that, the results will be, yes,
Makes
less.
sense. Yeah. So Rehan has this question that the context for LLM will fall under input, or we can also add context in output requirements.
Yes, so you can provide some context in the output requirements through your examples. So you could provide an example output to the AI. It's helpful if that example relates to your subject area. So you could then provide some context about your subject in the example. You can also provide context in the output. So you could list something and say, this is contextual information about the content I am teaching. You label that very clearly and you provide that context to the AI. That's useful. You could also provide the context of, the material should look like this, and then you provide what this is, whatever the details are. So yes, the more context, I would say typically the better, but you don't want to provide so much context that it outweighs your criteria and your output objectives, because then you get this fuzzy, spending way too many tokens on contextual information, not enough tokens on directions and output.
Perfect. So Mark was asking that is the output directly downloadable within the app in doc file? I believe he's asking for Eduade.
Yes, in Eduade, everything is directly downloadable in a doc, PDF, or Microsoft Word. Sorry, Google
Perfect.
Doc, rather.
So Bilal Zedi has asked, how can we contact you if we face problem in creating any resource?
Allow me to share my screen for just a moment. Again, a couple of ways. If you are on Eduade AI and you run into a problem, right here under your system settings, there is a support button. These emails go directly to me, so I will see them and will respond to you within 24 hours at the latest. Last few questions here. Human mind is too much creative. How to emerge human creativity with AI? Ultimately, the creativity will still be within the domain of the human. You are the creative engine of the AI. The AI does nothing without your direction. And if you do not know where you're going, the AI will not know where it is going. You must have a very clear mind. You must act as though you are like a director of a film. You must specify all of the details and the layout of the materials. And then the AI is simply the tool that you use to get there. But it itself is not a substitute for your creativity. In short, we cannot totally depend on AI for giving productive results. We can also have clear concepts. Yes, you cannot rely on or depend on the AI for productive results in the classroom. You have to still know what it is to elicit a productive result in the classroom, or what it is to get a student to create, create materials that would either get them closer to meeting that learning objective, or create assessments that would elicit performance to get you to that learning objective. But again, it's not itself the thing that will do it. You still are the engine of the creativity and direction. Eduade is limited on generation of teaching related materials, not for taking assessments. Yes, Eduade is solely for the instructional design component. That is all the back end work of being a teacher, planning your instruction, creating the materials for instruction, and then you can export those materials in any way that you see fit to use them for your purposes. So you can create assessments and then post them as a digital exam, but Eduade is not the platform where students would take that exam, for example. So you can make the things and then put them wherever you please and use them. Can the platform follow the IB curriculum? Yes, it can. And actually, we are building in a formal IB standards integration that will be coming with this new update. But in the meantime, if you just upload your curriculum or you just share your specifics about your curriculum, Eduade can align to there.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for such an insightful and engaging webinar. Your session has truly, changed the perception of AI in education. We now have a much clearer understanding of where AI, including large language models, can add value, and equally, importantly, where it should not be relied upon. So, and the practical examples that you shared, they were very insightful and very valuable. Thank you so much. It was a lovely webinar. We all enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a great evening, everyone.